Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you. Thank you, conference. Thank you. Thank you, conference. Thank you. Thank you, conference. Only the Conservative Party can deliver the stronger economy and stronger borders that will give people a more prosperous future. Every generation must face its test. In the 1940s, our test was to defeat fascism and ensure the victory of freedom. In the 1980s, it was to banish socialism and deliver prosperity. And in the 2020s, our test is to restore a strong economy, secure our borders, and rebuild Britain's strength so our children inherit a country that works. Ladies and gentlemen, conference, thank you. Thank you for standing by the only party that can meet the test of our generation. The only party that can deliver a stronger economy and stronger borders. Everything else relies on getting this right. National security, order on the streets, decent healthcare, high-quality education, cohesion in our communities. None of this exists without a strong economy and strong borders. A weak economy makes us poorer. The services we rely on get worse, and people cannot build a better life for themselves or their families. Weak borders allow people to exploit our generosity, put our housing and public services under pressure, and fracture our sense of who we are as a nation. A weak economy and weak borders means steady decline. I reject that fate. Together, we Conservatives will save Britain from that fate. And we can do it together because we are a strong team. My fantastic shadow cabinet, Mel, Chris, Claire, Laura, Rob, Andrew, both of them, James, both of them, Mims, Jesse Stewart, all of you, thank you. Thank you so much. My front bench, experienced hands and rising stars, conference, we know our MPs and peers have more collective wisdom than the rest of Parliament put together. And it's not just them. Let's not forget Darren and our MSs in Wales, Russells, and our MSPs in Scotland, our fantastic mayors. Labour beater, Ben Houchin, Reform slayer, Paul Bristow, councillors, activists, you are our party, thank you. I joined our party as an activist 20 years ago. I was with you delivering leaflets, knocking on doors. I sat in this hall listening to speeches. I celebrated all our wins, and I felt the pain of every defeat. I cannot tell you now how honored, how privileged, and how proud I am to stand before you as leader of our party, leader of the Conservative Party, the only party that can meet the test of our generation. And you are more than just a political party to me. You have supported me, you have stood by me, you have enabled me to achieve more than I ever dreamed. You are my family, in many ways, quite literally. I married the deputy chairman of my association, and I certainly would not be standing here today without my husband, Hamish. Thank you, Hal. I love this party for what it has given me. But more than that, I love it because it has made life better for so many in our country and will do so again. Time and time again, guided by our values and our principles, we have steered this country through its darkest days. And today, we must be ready to do the same again. Because we are the only party that has the vision, the courage, and the competence to tear up a broken political model, deliver a new blueprint for our country, and together take Britain into an era of prosperity and security. To do this conference, we must be frank about the problems our country faces, because they are not the same ones that we faced in the 1940s, or the 1980s, or even the 2010s. The country that Hamish and I were born in had its issues, but thanks in large part to hard choices taken by this party, opportunity was there for people who worked hard. People had a sense of pride in our national story and excitement about the future. I'm not so sure young people feel that way anymore. They feel they are living somewhere where things never get any better. Britain is stagnating while the world around us moves on. We are competing with restless and ambitious countries around the world. We are competing with 1 billion people in India striving to become middle class. We are competing with economic success stories like Poland. 15 years ago, Polish workers came here to find opportunity. Now, Poland is growing twice as fast as we are. While Britain was redefining what a woman is, China was building 5 nuclear reactors. Conference people around the world are determined to lift their lives and their children's lives up to a standard that we have taken for granted. Some countries won't be able to do this, and in those countries, millions of people will decide that they want to come here instead. And if our borders are not secure, they will succeed, especially if our economy is addicted to migration. Of course, we want brilliant minds and great talents to come here, but at the moment, we are not just taking in doctors and engineers and scientists. We are accepting hundreds of thousands of people, some with many dependents, some with no skills at all. This broken immigration model is heaping pressure on our public sector, a public sector which already, every year, demands more and more and more of our money. Yet services don't get better, they get worse. Everyone in this room knows what I'm talking about. We have all felt it. We used to ring up our GP and get an appointment the same day. Now we have to wait on the phone to see if we're one of the lucky ones. We have potholes that have been around for so long, people are holding birthday parties for them. But underneath all of this is a society which is struggling to cope with the reality of getting poorer, struggling to cope with the erosion of a sense of who we are as a country. We cannot drift our way into solving these problems. We know what drift looks like. It looks like allowing the trade unions to overturn years of progress in school standards. It looks like letting our veterans face vexatious prosecutions when we should be worrying about the strength of our military. Drift looks like Labour's one-in, one-out returns deal with France that ends up letting 100 people in for every one who leaves. Being timid will get us nowhere. We need bold ideas. We need a positive vision for this country and a plan to deliver it. We need a new approach that delivers a stronger economy and stronger borders. We owe that to our children. During our time in government, we did great things. Labour want to pretend the last 14 years were all bad. They want to forget that they were losing all that time. Let's remind them. Between 2010 and 2020, we slashed the deficit. We lifted millions of people out of tax and got millions into work. We sent English schools soaring up the international league tables. We led the coalition against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The conference, the truth is, we didn't always fight hard enough for what we believed in. We need to remember who we are fighting for. We are fighting for people who work hard and do the right thing. We are fighting for people who ask, why do sickness benefits pay more than the minimum wage, more than the living wage even? We are fighting for small business owners, people who take risks and get things done. We are fighting for the victims of crime. They want to know that we are on their side, that criminals will face the full force of the law. We are fighting for the farmers, putting food on our tables. These are our people, conference. They are the backbone of our country. We fought for them before, and we will fight for them again. Conference, time and time again, we have been the only party that is bold enough to do what is needed, the only party that is competent enough to do it properly. We were bold enough to create the modern police force, to introduce free state education for every child. We were radical enough to launch the right to buy, to free the workplace from the dead hand of the state, to give working men the vote, and better late than never, women too. We were courageous enough to introduce same-sex marriage. And of course, we were brave enough to take Britain out of the European Union, honoring the biggest democratic mandate in our history. All conservative achievements. Yes, all of that was us. But enough about past glories. Actually, how about one more? Conference, do you know the one thing we Conservatives have done the most throughout our history? Clear up the mess left by Labour. And my goodness, they are making one hell of a mess. Never in the field of human history have so many been let down by so few. All they have delivered is a doom loop of higher taxes, weaker borders, and month after month of chaos. They had a plan to win, but no plan for power, no vision for Britain. They know how to make promises, but not how to deliver them. This year, the Prime Minister was asked to name his best moment in office. Do you know what he said? Walking into Downing Street. For once, I agree with him. It's been downhill all the way since. What have Labour given us? An anti-corruption minister under investigation for corruption, a homelessness minister who made her own tenants homeless, a housing secretary sacked for dodging housing taxes. You couldn't make this stuff up. We had a transport secretary fired for stealing a phone, and our ambassador in Washington thrown out in disgrace. There is an old joke that a diplomat is someone sent abroad to lie for their country. Well, at least in Peter Mandelson, they had a man of experience. Just look at the spectacle we saw in Liverpool last week. Minister after minister failing to rule out the tax rises we all know are coming. The mayor of Manchester touting his own manifesto for the country. But to be honest, I can't blame Andy Burnham for that one. Who doesn't want to get rid of this utterly useless, weak Prime Minister? After 5 years as Labour leader, people still don't know what Keir Starmer stands for. And you know what the real problem is? He doesn't know himself. Today we learn that Labour deliberately collapsed the trial of 2 men accused of spying on MPs for China because the Prime Minister wants to suck up to Beijing. This is squalid. We have got the measure of them, conference. Just look at Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary. She's trying to convince us that she's tough, right? I remember when Shabana Mahmood tried to stop foreign criminals being deported. Do you remember that, Rob? I remember when she lay down on the ground in front of a Sainsbury's protesting because they were selling food from Israel. So forgive me if I treat this newfound tough image with a little skepticism. You remember. Labour represents everything that is wrong with politics. Rachel Reeves likes to congratulate herself for breaking the glass ceiling. What she's really broken is our economy. Attacking those who work hard, destroying business confidence, forcing wealth creators to leave the country, piling debt onto our children. We know that in her November budget of doom, she will give us all something to cry about. The highest business taxes since the 1970s, taxes on farmers, taxes on education, an unprecedented tax, punishing parents who work hard to invest in their children's future. Shameful. The tax burden is so high, it is making Britain poorer. Because business is giving up. Business is leaving. And as they leave, or never start in the first place, people's livelihoods, people's hopes, people's dreams go with them. Grangemouth Refinery, gone. Merck, BMW, Ineos, pulling investment. Schools for children with special needs are shutting their doors. Farmers feeling they've got no way out. The London Stock Exchange dropping out of the world's top 20 for listings. Our party knows that a job is the best route out of poverty. We got unemployment to a 40-year low. And what has happened since Labour came in? A jobs tax, unemployment up, inflation up, borrowing up. These are the real-life consequences of a weak, directionless government. Conference, last year, the public voted for change, but all they have been given is change for the worse. And because they are still angry with us, parties that in normal times would never be seen as a serious option for government are gaining ground, making promises they will never be able to keep. Let's look at what's on offer out there for all those disappointed by Labour. Reform promising free beer tomorrow, Jeremy Corbyn promising free jam, Lib Dems promising free lentils. All of them promising more spending, blowing up the public finances. Whether it's Starmer, Farage, Corbyn or Davey, all these men are shaking the same magic money tree. Following the same failed playbook, no plan for growth, no honesty about the scale of the challenges, and it always leads to the same result. More government, more taxes, more debt. It is irresponsible, it's cynical, and it's why Britain needs Conservatives back in charge. But we can't beat them simply by attacking them. As George Bernard Shaw said, never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. We have to offer something better. So what are we going to do? Conference, as you may have heard, I am an engineer. My starting point is always to carry out a diagnosis before producing the blueprint to put it right. Since I became your leader, my shadow cabinet and I have analysed the problems facing the country. Our diagnosis is clear. Britain is being held back by a broken model. A model which says the government always knows best, that high immigration is always good for the economy, that Britain should apologise for its history rather than be proud of it. We lost because we accepted the status quo no more. When Margaret Thatcher was leader of the opposition, she said this: if every Labour government is prepared to reverse every Tory measure, while Conservative governments accept nearly all socialist measures, the end result is only too plain. She was right. To fix our country, we must reverse Labour's measures. So, we will cancel their vindictive tax on education. Vicky knows what's coming. We will scrap their tax on family farms. Andrew, we will scrap their tax on family businesses. And we will reverse the terrible measures in Angela Rayner's unemployment bill, written by the unions, for the unions, a bill that will wrap firms in red tape, cost business £5 billion, and make Angela Rayner probably one of the last people in Britain to ever be legally sacked. The conference simply unwinding Labour's measures isn't enough. We are Conservatives, not anarchists. I am an engineer, not an arsonist. So together, thank you. So together, we are going to build something better. We are creating a blueprint for Britain, a new settlement based on Conservative values. So what's in it? First, securing our borders. On Sunday, I announced our plan to take the UK out of the ECHR, to scrap the Human Rights Act, to deport 150,000 illegal immigrants. This is a plan, not a slogan. Next in my blueprint, work and welfare. If we want to end our over-reliance on immigration, then we must make sure that every British citizen who can work does work. Right now, there are 6.5 million working-age adults claiming benefits instead of working. You heard me right, 6.5 million. That is the entire population of Cardiff and Belfast and Glasgow and Manchester combined, being paid to sit at home all day. We cannot expect people to get up and go to work and pay more and more in taxes to subsidize millions of others not to work. It should not be controversial to say this. Conference, we have done the hard work, and we have a plan to cut welfare spending. First, British benefits for British citizens. It is common sense that you should not draw out of a system that you haven't paid into. Second, we will restrict benefits to those with the more severe mental health conditions, not anxiety or mild depression. Yes, these challenges are real and people should get support, but they cannot be treated as a reason for a lifetime off work. And third, we will restrict mobility vehicles to people with serious disabilities. Those cars are not for people with ADHD. These are the first steps of a radical reform of our welfare system. We will return it to its founding principle, that support only goes to those that really need it. This should be common sense, but only the Conservatives understand this. Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, the Nationalists, and Reform are all demanding more welfare spending. They don't care that it's not fair, but we do. After COVID, 2,000 people a day were being signed onto out-of-work sickness benefits. It is a national tragedy that in just 1 year of Labour, the latest figure has more than doubled. 5,000 new people are signing on each and every single day. Many are young people who are losing the chance to make something of themselves, never knowing what it's like to pay their own way. This isn't just about saving money, important though that is. It's far more than that. It is driven by our deep Conservative conviction that work is a good in itself. And as people work, as they strive, as they provide for themselves and their families, they should not pay more and more of their money in taxes to a state that provides less and less. So fixing the state is next in our blueprint. Since Brexit and COVID, the size of the civil service has swollen by over a third. There are now more than 500,000 civil servants. And have you noticed? Is government working a third better for you? I don't think so. So we are going to reverse this. We are going to cut the civil service back to where it was in 2016. And as Conservatives, we don't just believe in reducing the size of the state. I have always said that while government should do less, what it does, it should do well. Let me give you an example. Conservatives are proud of our police. Unlike Labour, we will always have their back. But security and prosperity cannot exist in a country where the law is mocked. where crime is ignored, and where criminals laugh at justice. Right now, tens of thousands of police hours are wasted every year on non-crime hate incidents and form filling. Officers chasing tweets instead of thieves. The shadow justice secretary is stopping more fare evaders than Transport for London. Thank you, Rob. Conference, we are going to free the police to protect the public, not to chase political correctness. Right now, our police are spending 800,000 hours every single year waiting with mental health patients. 800,000 hours. That's the equivalent of 400 police officers doing nothing else all year except waiting around. No more. Every single officer we free from pointless paperwork, we will put back on our streets. We will send them after the shoplifters, making life a misery for high streets. And we will triple stop and search, because the more people we stop, the more people we search, the more knives we take off the streets. Across public services, we are developing similarly detailed plans to make things work better. In the NHS, industrial action has kept waiting lists high for far too long. Enough is enough. We will ban doctors from going on strike. In education, Labour have bent over to the teaching unions and are removing our academy freedoms, which have been so successful. We will reverse this act of educational vandalism, and we will make sure that brilliant schools and teachers have the freedom to do what they do best: teach. Because education should be how people change their lives. It should help you develop the skills you need to get on in life. It should ensure you get the job you want. So, if your name's Rachel, you can be an economist instead of working in customer complaints. And speaking of customer complaints, let's talk about university. Every year, thousands of young people go off to university, but leave with crippling debt and no real prospects. Nearly 1 in 3 graduates see no economic return. And every year, taxpayers write off over £7 billion in unpaid student loans. Wasted money, wasted talent. That's every year. A rigged system propping up low-quality courses while people can't get high-quality apprenticeships that lead to real jobs. And this is personal for me. I did 2 degrees, one in engineering, one in law. But I also had an apprenticeship first. And while I can't remember how to do parallel integration, I can remember how to fix a broken computer, which I learned to do during my apprenticeship. I was working with adults, I was paying my own way, and it gave an 18-year-old me a self-confidence that my university degrees never did. And unlike my degrees, I wasn't left with any debt. So we will shut down rip-off courses and use the money to double the apprenticeship budget. We'll be giving thousands more young people the chance of a proper start in life, just like I had. Which brings me, conference, to the most important task that we will face, and the centerpiece of our blueprint. The reason why the Conservative Party is the only party in Britain who can be trusted to meet the test of our generation is that none of this works without a strong economy. Securing our borders, getting people into work, policing our streets, defending the nation, none of it is possible without the money to pay for it. And we are the only party with a plan to get our economy back on track. It starts with fiscal responsibility. We have to get the deficit down, and we must also show how every tax cut or spending increase is paid for. So today, I am introducing a new golden economic rule. Every pound we save will be put to work. At least half will go towards cutting the deficit, because living within our means is our first priority. And with the rest, we will get Britain growing and bring down the taxes that are stifling our economy. Over the next decade, Rachel Reeves is going to double the deficit with her borrowing and tax doom loop. She is stealing from our children and grandchildren, and Conservatives will put an end to it. We will always explain upfront where we will make these savings. We're not going to do what Labour did, promise not to cut public spending, only to snatch away pensioners' winter fuel payments. We are doing things differently. Thanks to the hard work of the Shadow Cabinet, we have already identified £47 billion in savings. Pretty has earmarked £7 billion from the overseas aid budget. Alex has identified £8 billion from cutting the civil service. And Helen has found £23 billion from welfare. Under our golden rule, half of those savings will go towards reducing Labour's deficit. With the rest, we are going to unleash our economy. That's the Conservative way. Responsibility today, opportunity tomorrow. Like so many young people, all of my first jobs were on the high street. Yes, in McDonald's. Have I ever mentioned that? But it wasn't just me. All of my friends were doing similar jobs. Cafes, local pubs, family-run shops, the places that make our high streets what they are. The shops and businesses essential to communities in every town and village. And so on Monday, you heard Mel make our commitment to abolish their business rates. So whether you're a councillor, a mayoral candidate, a campaigner, I want you to go out there and spread the word that the Conservatives are bringing back the high street. Conference, energy is growth. It always has been, and it always will be. Countries with cheap energy grow faster. Countries with expensive energy decline. Right now, we pay 4 times what industry in the US does for electricity. The result? We are deindustrializing. It's not just manufacturing that is disappearing, not just steel, not just chemicals, not just ceramics, not just oil and gas. We are losing our farming industry. We are losing our fishing industry. These are the foundations of a strong economy, and they are going all because we chose a slogan of net zero over a serious strategy for a stronger economy and a better environment. So I am saying enough. I am reversing this. we will get rid of the Climate Change Act and replace it with a proper strategy that actually works. A strategy which protects the natural environment and the landscapes we love. A strategy that takes sensible steps to tackle climate change without bankrupting ourselves in the process. We will cut bills for families, slash costs for businesses, end the madness that you have to tear out your boiler or disconnect your gas hob. We are going to bring industry and jobs back home. This is real action, conference, not slogans. Conference, I'm not a climate change skeptic, but I am a net zero skeptic. Britain has already done more than any major country to cut emissions. But we cannot have a law which will make this country poorer while creating jobs abroad and increasing our reliance on hostile states. So we will axe the carbon tax on electricity. We will scrap Labour's wind and solar levy, and instead we will give you our cheap power plan. Through this plan, we will cut bills by £165 for the average family, nearly £5,000 for the average restaurant, and over £1,100 for the average pub. These are savings that can be passed on to consumers. So, conference, I won't promise you free beer, but I do want you all to have cheaper beer. So now it is time to put British prosperity first. Give this country the cheap, reliable energy it needs to thrive again. Backing nuclear, but also recognizing that it is pure folly to ban new oil and gas extraction while paying to import resources that Norway takes from the very same basin. So when it comes to the North Sea, we have a very simple policy. Drill our oil and gas now. Conference, you have seen it out there in the fringes all over Manchester, that this is a party fizzing with ideas, building our policy programme, setting out our plans, a tax cut for our high streets, a helping hand for the young with our first jobs bonus, reforms to welfare, 10,000 new police officers, tripling stop and search, scrapping the sentencing council, a new removals force, improving behaviour in schools, doubling apprenticeships, support for our veterans, £165 off your electricity bills, drilling in the North Sea, an end to the energy profits levy, scrapping the family farm tax, scrapping the family business tax, scrapping VAT on school fees, out to the ECHR, a plan for our borders, a plan for a stronger economy. Thank you. And conference, because of all the savings we found and costed, because of the tough decisions on what the government shouldn't do, because of our golden economic rule, we can afford to make one more announcement. As the Conservative Party, we know who our people are. They are people who work hard. They are the people who save hard. They are the people who understand the importance of putting down roots. They are the people who make sacrifices today for a better life tomorrow. They do the right thing. Our people are the Brits who want to get ahead in life. At the heart of a conservative Britain is a country, people there's a country where people who wish to own their own home can. I remember the joy when I got the first set of keys to my first flat, the excitement of opening my own front door for the very first time, the smell of the fresh paint. I remember it just like yesterday. I want everyone in our country to have that feeling, to know it's your place, your house, your home. We Conservatives believe that owning your own home gives you a real stake in society, roots in your community. But our housing market is not working as it should. There is a big barrier that keeps getting in the way. That barrier, conference, is the tax you have to pay when you buy your home. I haven't even said what it is yet, but you all know. You all know that that barrier is stamp duty. Young people trapped in the pain of renting, workers who want to further their career, pensioners who want to downsize but can't afford the thousands of pounds they have to pay in tax. Conference, stamp duty is a bad tax. It is an unconservative tax. The last Conservative government cut stamp duty for thousands of home buyers. But now we must go further. We must free up our housing market, because a society where no one can afford to buy or move is a society where social mobility is dead. So I have looked at the stamp duty thresholds to see where we can change them. I have looked at the rates you have to pay to see if we can lower them. I have decided that we can't, because that simply wouldn't be enough. Conference, the next Conservative government will abolish stamp duty on your home. It'll be gone. I thought you'd like that one. Thank you. Thank you. That is how we will help achieve the dream of home ownership for millions. Home ownership should be a dream that's open to everyone. Abolishing stamp duty on your home is a key to unlock a fairer and more aspirational society. We cannot unpick every tax. The debt, the deficit, and the damage this Labour government is creating means we cannot do everything all at once. Scrapping stamp duty will benefit people of all ages, because conservatism must speak to all generations. The young professional buying their first flat, the couple looking for somewhere to bring up their first baby, the growing family hunting for their forever home, the pensioner who wants somewhere a little smaller or maybe to move nearer the grandchildren. No longer will they be punished with a tax that is a barrier to doing the right thing for them, for their family, and for society. Thank you. And this change will bring wider benefits to our economy too. Because every time a home is sold, it triggers a chain reaction of activity. Movers, builders, decorators, flat pack furniture, and DIY. Trips to Next, John Lewis, and IKEA. And I can afford to do this while still leaving space within my golden economic rule, because that's the fiscally prudent way to do things. That's what conservatives do. conference. I want to see a better Britain, where people have a brighter and more prosperous future. The Labour Party fails when it follows its principles. We fail when we don't follow ours. We are going to follow the same timeless conservative principles which have led us to success in the past. Personal responsibility, free enterprise, family, freedom of speech. People want to know what I stand for? I stand for a government that takes less of your money and doesn't interfere in your life, where the state does less but does it better, where those who create wealth are welcomed with open arms, not driven from our shores, where reward matches effort, where Britain stands tall in the world. I stand for an economy where profit is not a dirty word, where enterprise is supported, not crushed. I stand for a country where what you put in determines what you get out, where excellence is celebrated. I stand for a country where actions have consequences, where we talk about responsibilities as well as rights, where crime is punished and justice is served, where the welfare of victims outweighs the welfare of criminals. I stand for a society where free speech trumps hurt feelings, where everyone knows what a woman is, where people are judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, where the vulnerable are supported, but where freeloaders are told where to get off. Conference, I stand for stronger borders and a stronger economy so that the young can fulfill their potential, the old can live out their years in dignity, and everyone can achieve their dreams to own a home, run a business, raise a family. This is the Britain I stand for. If it is the Britain you stand for, then stand with me and let's build it together.
Well, there we go. Kemi Badenoch's first speech as Conservative Party leader, as leader of the opposition. She seemed like she rather enjoyed that. It must be said, the hall clearly did as well. A standing ovation for the Conservative leader, talking about wanting to restore a strong economy, securing Britain's borders and rebuilding Britain's strength. But it was that announcement, quite a significant announcement, delivered almost, I would suggest, with giddy excitement from Kemi Badenoch that if the Conservative Party were returned to power, they would axe stamp duty in its entirety. She said, we must free up our housing market because as a society where no one can afford to buy or move is a society where social mobility is dead. But it was also a speech that very much laid into the Labour government, talking about its vindictive tax on education, on family farms, on business, and confirmation of that new Conservative economic golden rule, where half of savings will be used to reduce the deficit and half will be used to boost growth. Interestingly, in that nearly 1 hour speech, which was funny at times, there was only one mention, I think, of Nigel Farage, very much in contrast to what we heard in the other speeches at other party conferences from Sir Ed Davey and from the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. This was an attempt by Kemi Badenoch to define who she is as a politician and where she wants to take the Conservative Party over the next couple of years in a hope of being returned to power. But looking at the polls at the moment, that does frankly seem a long way off. Amanda Akas is with me here live in Manchester. And Amanda, let's talk about the eye-catching initiative, the rabbit out of the hat, if you like, first of all, and that is getting rid of stamp duty.
Yes, it's interesting. So apparently last year, stamp duty raised more than £18 billion for the Treasury. So that's a lot of money for a government, particularly a government. The Shadow Chancellor has outlined £47 billion in spending cuts and savings, although I do think that's over the course of the entire Parliament. So we wait to see exactly how all these figures will add up. But the message of the speech overall was about prudence and fiscal stability and responsibility and ending what she described as the kind of doom loop of the Labour government, really hitting out at Chancellor Rachel Reeves and her spending plans with this kind of £30 billion black hole in the budget that she's got coming up. But now we have a big offer from the Tories because they know it can't all be about cuts and austerities and reducing the welfare bill. They've got to have something positive, something eye-catching to offer people. And after nearly a year of her leadership, as you've been saying, we haven't really had many of these kind of giveaway style announcements. Now, clearly they're years away from an election. We had at the weekend this kind of dramatic announcement about leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, something which is in itself quite controversial. But this is much more sort of eye-catching, isn't it? It's something that's much more relatable to people who are thinking about who they're going to vote for, things that will affect people in their day-to-day lives.
And there's been an awful lot of talk about Margaret Thatcher this week, out of sight, essentially, but in my eye line, I can see they are packing up those famous dresses that have been
and the tank
boxed
was
in
moved
here.
Away.
But in many ways, this was quite Thatcherite, if you like, talking about housing and it as a form of social mobility. We had big promises on reducing taxation and also on the state doing less. This, in many ways, was a return to kind of old-fashioned conservatism, as you like.
I think that's the ground that they very much decided that they want to fight on. And there was an interesting kind of evocation of the challenge that the Tory party are facing currently. She really drew a kind of equivalent with the challenges faced by the Tories in leading the country in the 1940s, clearly during the Second World War, and again in the 1980s, when she said, well, they were focused on rebuilding the economy then and fighting against socialism. So that was clearly an evocation of Margaret Thatcher and Sir Winston Churchill, clearly the two iconic previous Conservative Party leaders. But as you say, we've heard a lot about Margaret Thatcher throughout this conference, nearly everyone talking about her in their speeches and her love of tax cutting and of cutting
and
back
very
red
much
tape
reflected
too.
in that speech, isn't it? Well, we can hear now from Beth, who's been in the hall trying to hoover up some reaction to that speech, and I think she's been speaking to Robert Jenrick.
What did you make of her speech?
I thought it was a great speech, wasn't it? Super positive, lots of policies for the future, and at the heart of it, the two most important things facing our country now. How do we secure our borders? How do we fix the debt and the deficit and the economy that's crumbling under Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer? And a very good policy to get stamp duty out of the way so everyone, regardless of your age or income, can get moving, and that's what we need right now.
She didn't talk about reform. They're your biggest
We're not obsessed by reform.
Why not?
Because we want to be better
They're
than reform.
taking all your voters.
Each and every day. That's our strategy.
Final question. That's her first leader's speech. Will it be her last?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let's get behind her.
Well, they go a potential future leadership rival, certainly one in the past, saying that it will not be our last speech. There's been a lot of speculation, of course, this week about the situation the Conservative Party find themselves in regards to the polls. But what was interesting there, to follow on from Beth's question, was unlike Keir Starmer's speech and Sir Ed Davies' speech, where it was all about Nigel Farage. As I said, I think he got only mentioned once briefly in this, but that is a strategy in many ways not to give reform, from what the Conservatives would see, more oxygen.
I think partly, and also I think it's a genuine recognition that Reform are taking away, or many of their supporters, and indeed many Tory supporters, if they haven't already moved across to Reform, are tempted by them. They're kind of fishing in the same pool of ideological voters to a degree, and I think therefore they don't want to say anything that will kind of alienate people who are intrigued by the kind of ideas of Nigel Farage.
OK, we are going to bounce back into the hall if we can, because Beth Rigby is speaking to James Cleverly live. Let's listen in.
Look, he's talented, he's a brilliant communicator, but ultimately it's paper thin, and we see this whenever he makes an announcement, it falls apart within 5 minutes.
A massive policy announcement today, scrapping stamp duty. It's a £9 billion retail offer for the public. There's been a lot of policy in this conference, and you're really setting out a platform. My question for you, though, to be honest, given how far you've fallen in the polls in the last year, you worried it's a little too late, too little too late?
Look, our job is not to sit around being emotional. Our job
I always sit around being emotional.
Well, it's to set out a plan, and Kemi has set out an unambiguous plan. And as I say, we spent some time getting it right. We know the numbers balance. We know these policies stack up because they've been tested, been grilled by her team, by Mel, by his team. This is the big difference between us and Labour and the Lib Dems and Reform.
James,
ours are the only books that balance.
Final question.
Go on.
Kemi Badenoch said yesterday, she said, I always said this was going to be hard. She said, she said when she became leader 11 months ago, it's going to be hard. When do you need things to start turning around? When do you want to see the...
Beth, it's already happened. I've been speaking to journalists, activists, and people who maybe 6 months ago couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Today can see the change has happened.
So do you think you'll see the polls ticking up now?
I think we will. I mean, and it's not going to be instant. So tomorrow morning, don't expect to see all our problems go away. We know this is a long, hard fight. We are up for the fight, and we are going to stick with the programme.
OK, James Cleverly, thank you for indulging me for so long. I appreciate that. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
And there you go, Beth Rigby speaking to James Cleverly live inside the conference hall. And Amanda, what is fascinating about this conference is it genuinely has been policy heavy. I mean, you have to remember, it's not that long ago that Kemi Badenoch was suggesting she wasn't going to make any significant policy announcements until the middle of this Parliament. Clearly, there's been a change of tack, not least of all because of where the polls are at. But we've had a lot of announcements this week.
There's been a bit of a blizzard of them, really. I mean, it started off just before conference started with this announcement about leaving the ECHR, this plan to set up a US-style immigration removals force, which would deport 150,000 people a year. Quite a few questions about where they would exactly come from and where they would go to. Moving on to these announcements about the economy and this £47 billion worth of saving as well, which clearly is what Kemi Badenoch was elaborating on just then.
OK, Amanda, for the moment, we're going to pause there because we're going to bounce back again into the hall and join Beth, who's talking to Victoria Aikens.
I know you won't like me saying it, but there has been lots of talk about whether she is suitable to lead the party because all of the metrics have gone backwards, and you are in a difficult position. You're joint third in the latest poll that YouGov has with the Lib Dems on 17%. Do you think that that is enough now to silence her critics? And to her critics, what do you say?
I think this speech has shown just what the new Conservative Party looks like. I think she did a fantastic speech. But it's not just the speech, because Kemi, as herself will say, it's not just about talking, it's about doing. The whole of this conference has been about us brushing ourselves down, saying, look, we have listened and we continue to listen, and we are coming up with policies that we think meet the needs of the country today, but also in the years ahead. So this has been an amazing day, but also actually I think a really great conference, great buzz, and my goodness me, the Conservative Party is back.
I can see you feel quite buoyed.
Yeah.
The one thing I did want to ask you though is what surprised me in that speech is the biggest opponents that the Conservative brand and party is facing is reform. They are nicking your councillors, there's defections, you've lost 16 councils, some of them have gone to reform, or many of your councillors have turned to reform. It's a real problem for you, but she's not talking about reform. It's weird. Why not?
Well, they are just another political party, and while she
They're your
gave
biggest opponents right now.
while she gave a passing reference to them, this is our conference, our moment, and also
But
about
she went
us
in on
setting.
Labour, but not on Farage.
Because they're the government of the day, and this is about us setting our vision out for the future. They've all had their conferences; they can talk about their own policies or lack thereof. This is our moment, and she has really sent. She's really sent the message out there.
Are you worried about reform?
I think they'll be worried about us after this. My goodness me, you know, getting rid of this tax, which we all hate. Who doesn't hate stamp duty? I mean, none of us like paying taxes, but we get why we've got to do it. Suddenly, we've opened up the future of home ownership to young people. We've opened it up to families who want to grow their families. We've opened up to grandparents. This really goes, I think, to the heart of us as a country, but also us as a political party. We want people to have a future and have a grounding in their communities and have their own home.
Okay, Victoria Atkins, thank you so much. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. Thanks. I'll see you soon.
There you go, that's Beth Rigby in the hall. Amanda, as you can see, is still with me, and delighted to say that Alex Burkhardt, who is the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, is also with me. Alex, very good afternoon to you. You were in the hall. She seemed pretty happy with the speech, were you?
Yeah, absolutely. That was terrific. And that's one of the most exciting conference speeches I've ever heard. And I don't think anyone who watched that would be in any doubt the Conservatives are back. Yeah, a whole host of really...
Well, get too carried away.
Yeah, well, no. I know Sky News wouldn't get carried away. It's your job not to get carried away. But I'm a delegate at a Conservative Party conference, and I'm going to get very excited about it, because what we had there were a series of statements which called out the absolute disaster that Labour is making of the economy, how this is affecting people of all generations, all ages, all parts of the country, and what a future Conservative government will do about it. Yeah, to put more money back in people's pockets and get that economy moving. And I think, look, because of the terrible mess that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have made of the economy and the disastrous things that they will bring in at the budget in November, the economy is going to be absolutely front and central of people's minds going forward. And Alex, people will have seen today that the Conservative Party has the answers on this issue.
And you know this, the British public's memory is not that short. I mean, this is the big thing, isn't it, for the Conservative Party? Maybe this is the gamble, is, let's be honest about this, when Labour got elected last July, was the economy in a good state then?
Yes, it was.
It was.
We had the fastest growing economy in the G7.
So
inflation was coming down. And where's tax now?
Tax
is now at its highest level since
very high.
1946.
Borrowing was rising.
We have the highest tax burden now, thanks to this Labour government, since 1946.
Alex, the economy was
second
not
highest ever in peacetime.
Let's be honest about this. In July 2024. Borrowing was at record levels.
No, borrowing is now at record levels. The level of borrowing is coming down. It's now going right up.
You lost an election in part. You lost an election in part. If you're not going to admit this, then how do you think you're going to win over voters?
I'm very happy to admit that we lost the election.
Okay, so
I'm very happy to admit they lost the election. But
can I ask a question?
Go on.
Sorry. Right. You went to the biggest defeat since 1832. And one of the reasons you lost that election is people had lost their trust in you to run the British economy. And there's lots of evidence saying the British economy was not in a great state.
It's in a much better state than it is now.
If you want to fight a battle on the economy, fair enough. But do you not have to admit the mistakes were made in the past, that the economy was not in a great shape then, in order to win back people's trust?
Certainly made mistakes in the past. And we have a new leader now. We have a new leader and a new top team, and you've just seen today what that new leader and that new top team is going to offer this country. And I think that that's very important and will be very exciting, because the alternatives are Labour, who is making things very much worse. Everyone is feeling it. Reform, who have no sound economic policy at all, and the Conservative Party that has set out golden economic rule that is going to make the country more prosperous, put more money in people's pockets, and get the country's finances on a sound footing.
Okay, Alex, for the moment, please stay there. Very rigorous discussion this afternoon, but let's return to Beth, who's on the conference floor inside there. Beth, good afternoon to you. Your thoughts on this? I mean, certainly it was an eye-catching announcement on stamp duty.
Well, we said, didn't we, Darren, before I came in, that there was a rabbit in the hat here, and she had a big announcement, and actually it did not leak, and no one knew what it is or was. And she announced, Kemi Badenoch announcing that a Conservative government, should they win power, would abolish stamp duty. Now, that is a £9 billion tax cut that would apply to millions of people, and it really did energise and invigorate the room and invigorate the conference. And I think you took some of the doorsteps I did with the Cabinet after genuinely a lot of enthusiasm in this moment, in this room, for that policy and that speech. And why? A couple of things, Darren, that we were talking about. Number one, this was a Conservative leader that really needed to come here and try and assert her authority over a party with endless discussions about whether she is the right person to lead them, given that 11 months into her leadership, Nigel Farage has stolen the megaphone and really stolen the march on the Conservatives. Hundreds of councillors hundreds of council seats move into Reform, dozens of councillors defecting, 18 senior Conservatives defecting to Reform. So she really needed to try and sort of show that she was up for the fight and that she had a plan and she had an argument to take for the party, but also to the country. And then I think what you saw in that speech was a lot of policy and policy promises, because I think there's been an admission within her team that they were slow out of the blocks in a very fast-paced political environment. As I said, Nigel Farage stealing the initiative on things like immigration policy, and they really need to get a retail offer out to the public, and they need to do it fast. So I think that's what they were trying to do today. I think once the dust settles and the headiness of the speech and the announcement dissipates, there's still fundamental questions, fundamentals about, do the public really trust the Conservatives on the economy? At the moment, it seems like voters are bunching the Conservatives and Labour together as people that are being in power or in power now, and they're not fulfilling promises and they're not delivering the change the country needs. And now they're looking at Reform as the change party. So can she convince the public? And I think that really, despite the giddiness in this room, because genuinely it was quite electric when she made that announcement, I think as the dust settles, the Conservatives are now looking forward to the May local elections and elections in Wales and Scotland. And if they go backwards, then there are going to be continuous questions about whether Kemi Badenoch needs to be removed as leader. I don't think those questions will go away, and I think now, between now and then in May, they really need to start to show some improvement in the polls. So I think she's going to have to get out there now and really make the argument. When you're in opposition, it's a battle for attention, because the government has the megaphone every single day, and she's given that megaphone to Nigel Farage. She needs to try to wrest it back.
And Beth, just very briefly, it's interesting you use the word giddy there. That is exactly how the word I use to describe effectively Kemi Badenoch making that announcement. But let's just briefly talk about where this leaves her. I think what is interesting, what I would say is, both for Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch, loads of questions going into the conference about leadership, about whether they would survive for much longer. It does feel that in both circumstances, they've managed, at least temporarily, to dampen that down. And I think you've got a sense with that, with her speech today, will have helped Kemi Badenoch retain her position for a little while longer.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dan. I think there's a couple of things. I think for Keir Starmer, what he did in his speech last week, and we talked about it, was that he managed to give the party faithful, if you like, something to fight for. So he set Labour up against Reform. He talked about a fork in the road, about what sort of Britain you wanted. And he got massive cheers in the Labour Hall when he talked about some of the racism seen across the country in recent months. And activists really liked what he had to say. And he really did buoy his audience confidence. There are still questions about whether he can translate that to the public. The poll out by YouGov today, I know it's only one poll, but Labour on 20%, Reform on 27%, the Conservatives joint third with the Liberal Democrats on 17%. So Keir Starmer, yes, he is doing better after that conference speech, but people are still looking at the May elections as a difficult moment for him. And of course, that November budget, how rocky is it going to get around that? And then Kemi Badenoch, I would say the same thing. What she's given today are activists, Conservative supporters, something to go and argue about, to fight about on the doorstep, a real retail offer that they can say that they can deliver to voters, because they need to try and get voters' attention. The danger for the Conservatives at the moment is just relevance. They just don't feel relevant because you've got Reform now almost like the unofficial opposition. And so she's got some real policies there. And I imagine, Darren, that tomorrow that stamp duty announcement, it might get on the front pages and will get talked about. So I think that she has come through this conference, as Keir Starmer did last week, with lots of questions about her. I think, yeah, maybe she's put some of them at bay because there were discussions about whether or not in November, when she's been leader for a year, MPs can then try and put in votes of letters of no confidence. And if you get above a certain threshold, she could have faced a leadership challenge. Now, will that go away and will the moment of reckoning become May? I don't know, Darren, but I can see an argument why people feel very buoyed today by that speech. She delivered it well. You know, she is a good public speaker and she delivered it well. The room were with her, so she'll be pleased with that. But for both of these leaders, the real problem is that Nigel Farage is doing all of the running, and she might not have name-checked him in that speech. I don't think the Conservatives want to go toe-to-toe with Reform and give them a real roughing up, not least because they want to get those voters back, because they're defected, often Conservative voters, so they don't want to pile in on Nigel Farage. But for both leaders, they somehow need to try and win back those voters that are saying none of the above and go into Reform. And I think we've just got to now see this play out. And as I said, for both of them, the May local elections with Wales and Scotland is a massive moment next year. And Keir Starmer, as I said, has a really big problem with that budget in November, when there could be potentially billions more of tax rises from a government that said a year ago, with that massive tax raising budget, we won't be coming back for more. That was Rachel Reeves' message, and I think that message is going to get blown out of the water, and let's see what the repercussions are for them then.
OK, Beth, as always, thank you very much indeed. Beth Rigby inside the conference hall there. Delighted to say outside, Amanda's still with me, but we're also joined by the National Chair of the Conservative Councillors Association. That's Councillor John Cope. Very good afternoon to you, John. First of all, your reaction to Kemi Badenoch's speech.
I actually genuinely felt quite emotional about that speech. You know, it was a speech that the Prime Minister should have given, and it was filled with plans, it was filled with genuine policies and a vision. You know, I think that the speeches we've heard at the other conferences have been speeches to the hall. And for me, that speech was a speech to the country. It was, you're feeling bad, and you know, as a councillor, we're in our communities all the time. We know that businesses are hurting. We know young people are struggling to get jobs. We know people are paying too many taxes. And I hope the country saw in that speech from Kemi vision.
Let's talk about the most eye-catching of them, which was stamp duty. I mean, frankly, the reason that lots of young people aren't getting on the property ladder is not because of stamp duty, it's because we haven't got enough homes. Yeah. I didn't see that mentioned in the speech anywhere.
Yeah, I'm very proud of the Conservatives' record in building houses. We built hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
We built far too few houses for decades in this country.
Absolutely, but when we came into government in 2010, housing was going off a cliff. Numbers of houses being built was down. And every year after 2010, house building went up and up and up until the pandemic, and then it did come down. So actually I'm very proud of the over 1 million houses that we built. Was it enough? No, we need to build more, but actually getting rid of stamp duty is an amazing step in order to give people, young people like me, genuine hope they can own a home.
I was talking to Alex beforehand. You went here suggesting that this speech is fundamentally all about the economy and trust the Conservative Party on the economy. But doesn't the Conservative Party have to admit the mistakes it made on the economy if it's going to win back people's trust? Doesn't seem like the Conservative leadership's prepared to do that, whether it's on record high taxation, tax burden in the country, whether it's on a lack of economic growth or the high borrowing levels. It doesn't seem that the Conservative Party are willing to admit they made quite significant mistakes in the past.
The very first line of Kemi's speech was the party's under new leadership. And then she went on to outline all of the amazing achievements of the government. But then she did also acknowledge that things didn't go in some places as we wanted to. In fact, I think her exact line was that Conservatives fail when we don't believe in our values enough. And I think there were times over the 14 years where we didn't stand up enough, we didn't fight hard enough, and she's apologised for that. But you can't just keep talking about the past. What that speech was about the future.
Well, you can in the essence that, first of all, she served in that government, and second of all, in order to win people's trust, yes, you talk about the future, but for many people out there, they'll still be quite angry. They'll still remember the mistakes made by a Conservative government that did increase their taxes time and again.
But what people are feeling now is not those things. They're feeling the jobs tax that Labour put in. Farmers are worried about what they're going to do with their farms. Businesses are struggling because their taxes are going up. Special needs schools are closing. That's what people are dealing with now. And we can live in the past and we can keep on having those debates and arguments and saying what we did right, what we did wrong. But I don't think people care about that. They see problems now caused by this government, and they want the Conservative Party to put forward costed, genuine plans to fix them.
But just finally on that, they're not coming to the Conservative Party, are they? They're going to the Reform Party instead. I mean, how many councillors left the Conservative Party yesterday?
20.
20.
And there are still 4,500, nearly 5,000 left.
But let's be honest about this. Like, things are not looking good. You are losing councillors. You're pretty low in the polls, almost historic low in the polls. Frankly, lots of people don't know who Kemi Badenoch is, let alone what the Conservative Party's policies are. Is this genuinely going to turn things around?
I mean, they certainly know what she stands for after that speech. I mean, she could not have been clearer. And it wasn't what Nigel Farage would do, which is just a random wish list of uncosted, random things that he thinks people want to hear. To be a Reform councillor is a great thing. You don't need to have any plans, you don't need to have any substance. Someone says, oh, I want houses. Yeah, we'll do that. Or you don't want houses there. Or we won't do that either. They'll just say whatever they need to get up in the polls. And they're really digging into that cynicism that the Labour government has caused. So I accept the polls, but what you saw in that speech was someone who's confident, that has a plan, has a fiscal rule that will actually pay for those policies. And for me, we're the only party with a plan that's costed that can actually deliver for the British people.
Amanda?
Yeah, councils across the country, though, really struggling to deliver public services given the level of public spending. We've just heard about big cuts to welfare in particular. That's where a big chunk of this money is going to come from, 23 billion in cuts to welfare. I mean, how are your councils going to deal with that across the country?
What they're going to do, Conservative councils are going to do what they always do, run really well-run councils, keep costs down, make it efficient. And you only need to look to Kent, right? The disaster that Reform has put on Kent. They came in, they threw in this PR about this Doge. Doge spent a couple of months trying to find anything. What did they find? A well-run Conservative council.
They were thrown out of office, weren't they? The Tories were thrown out there, so people don't want
Reform took the voters for months.
Cuts, do they?
They promised them that they're going to cut taxes and the Conservatives have got all these inefficiencies. They found none, and what have they announced? They're going to increase the council tax by 5%, right? So Reform made all these promises, they delivered none of them, and they're going to whack up taxes. So if you vote Reform and believe these wishy-washy, vague, populist policies, you are being taken for a mug, you're being lied to, and I'm confident in Kent, the next time the voters get a chance, they will kick out Reform.
And just very finally on this then, what if that doesn't happen? Because this time last year, the Conservatives were in a better position than they are today. They were higher in the polls, they had more councillors, and that was after an historic defeat. So if this time next year, or certainly by May of next year, it's as bad, if not worse, at what stage do you go, maybe it's not the policies, maybe it's the leader?
No. So politics is in a really dark place. Voters are cynical. They were promised change by Labour. Things got a lot worse. They've been promised change by Reform. It's got a lot worse. They're cynical. They're frustrated. They're angry, right? And I know I'm in the right place. I know I'm in the right party with the right values, the right principles. So, if I'm honest, the polls. So what? I'm in the right place. I'm going to keep on knocking on doors, talking to my residents, fighting for them, and making sure that Conservative message gets to them.
There you go. The polls, so what? John, we appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, as Kemi Badenoch was speaking, we've also been hearing from the Prime Minister. Of course, Keir Starmer is on a 2-day trip to India, today announcing the UK's first trade deal with India since Brexit, we had done earlier on this year. Let's have a listen in to what Keir Starmer had to say a little earlier.
Well, we have got the single biggest delegation trade mission ever to come to India. It's not just businesses, we've got universities, we've got cultural institutions, we've just done a fantastic deal on film, and here this is a Premier League initiative, the UK and India working together. So this really shows the strength of the relationship. Actually, in answer to your question, none of them have raised with me the question of visas. That wasn't part of the FTA. What this is about is providing the opportunities for them to take advantage of the FTA, and even before it's fully enforced, the mood is very, very strong between India and the UK, and I'm really, really pleased. And they're all bubbling with ideas. We're doing deals, they're doing deals every day of every conceivable sort. That's exactly right. It's really good for the UK and for jobs back in the United Kingdom. So there's a very successful trip.
Tomorrow you're having a meeting with Prime Minister Modi of India. Now, at the moment, we're funding one side in the Ukraine war, and he's funding the other by buying oil from his friend Vladimir Putin. Are you going to ask him to stop it?
Well, our position on Ukraine is very, very clear. And we've been strong supporters of Ukraine from the beginning of the conflict. We're one of the leading countries in the coalition of the willing, bringing together allies in order to ensure that if there is a ceasefire, it's lasting. And we've taken really effective sanctions in relation to particularly the shadow fleet. The relationship between India and the UK is also very strong, and that is a good thing for the United Kingdom. I would say it's an all-time high, actually. We signed an FTA, a free trade agreement, earlier this year, and tomorrow we will work through what further we can do together. So both our defence of Ukraine is as solid as ever, and we're a leading player in that, but I'm also really pleased that the relationship with India is really strong, probably stronger now than it's been for some considerable time.
But will you ask him to stop buying Russian oil?
Well, our position on energy into Russia is to bear down on the shadow fleet more than anything, which is where we've directed our focus. But it is a good thing for the United Kingdom that this bilateral relationship with India is in such a good place.
And finally, on the letter from the DPP yesterday, he specifically asked whether China was considered a threat to national security. He wasn't asking about the designation of the last government. He was asking, was it a threat to national security? Are you saying that in not being able to provide that information, that China was not a threat to national security?
Well, as you know, we were disappointed that the trial didn't proceed, but the position is very clear that the trial would have had to take place on the basis of the situation as it was at the time under the previous Tory government. So whatever their position was the only position that could be presented at trial. So it wasn't as it were this government's position, it was the Tory government before's position. Now that's not a political to and fro, that's a matter of law. You have to prosecute people on the basis of the circumstances at the time of the alleged offence. And so all the focus needs to be on the policy of the Tory government in place then. That's the only place that the evidence could be focused on. And I think that provides a sort of ray of spotlight into some of the issues that have been swirling around.
There you go, that was the Prime Minister speaking in India a little earlier. He's, of course, on an official visit there. You're doing this live here in Manchester at the Conservative Party conference, which has just wrapped up with Kemi Badenoch making her first speech as Conservative leader. Amanda Acas is with me here. Amanda, let's first of all just touch on what the Prime Minister was talking about there. Obviously, the UK signed a trade deal with India, which, it must be said, had taken quite a few years to get there, so the Prime Minister is clearly quite proud of it. But it's not to say that there are some big fundamental differences with business in this country over India, particularly around visas, and also for that relationship with the Indian government around things like Russia and Ukraine.
Well, it's a very sensitive one, isn't it? I mean, the PM's clearly very proud that he's gone to India with this huge delegation of business leaders. We heard him really bigging up as the biggest one that had been taken there to join him. But as you say, questions about visas being given out and the kind of unfairness, perceived unfairness, the criticism around that, denying that that's going to happen. And then around Modi, I mean, we know that he's someone who is closer to President Putin, certainly, than the UK and the US would perhaps like, and the Prime Minister really sidestepped questions there over whether or not he would use his meeting to kind of put pressure on him, on India, to stop buying Russian oil, which is clearly seen as a big factor in helping them fund the ongoing war in Ukraine, or indeed challenge him more broadly on that situation, which is clearly what everyone would like to see in terms of the Ukrainian side. At the same time, he's on a trade trip, as you say. They've spent a very long time trying to negotiate this agreement. It's still not fully implemented yet. There's still outstanding questions, and that's what clearly the Prime Minister wants to focus on.
OK, let's turn back, if we can, because that's what we're here to talk about, the Conservative Party conference. And let's just remind ourselves of what Kemi Badenoch had to say in the last hour or so, particularly those big announcements, and particularly that one on stamp duty.
So I have looked at the stamp duty thresholds to see where we can change them. I have looked at the rates you have to pay to see if we can lower them. I have decided that we can't, because that simply wouldn't be enough. Conference, the next Conservative government will abolish stamp duty on your home. So today, I am introducing a new golden economic rule. Every pound we save will be put to work. At least half will go towards cutting the deficit, because living within our means is our first priority. And with the rest, we will get Britain growing and bring down the taxes that are stifling our economy. Thousands of young people go off to university, but leave with crippling debt and no real prospects. Nearly 1 in 3 graduates see no economic return. And every year, taxpayers write off over £7 billion in unpaid student loans. Wasted money, wasted talent. That's every year. A rigged system propping up low-quality courses while people can't get high-quality apprenticeships that lead to real jobs. And this is personal for me. I did 2 degrees, one in engineering, one in law. But I also had an apprenticeship first. And while I can't remember how to do parallel integration, I can remember how to fix a broken computer, which I learned to do during my apprenticeship. I was working with adults, I was paying my own way, and it gave an 18-year-old me a self-confidence that my university degrees never did. And unlike my degrees, I wasn't left with any debt. So we will shut down rip-off courses and use the money to double the apprenticeship budget.
There you go, Kemi Badenoch speaking in the last hour. Clearly, the rabbit in the hat, the eye-catching initiative was the abolition of stamp duty if the Conservative Party got elected. Raises a lot of money, billions and billions of pounds in taxation. But this kind of felt to me a bit like, do you remember when George Osborne made that announcement around inheritance tax way back in, I think, 2007, if I'm right about that? But it defined, essentially, I think, him as a kind of shadow chancellor, and you got that sense that that's what Kemi Badenoch was trying to do today.
They've obviously thought really carefully about what their offering will be, and certainly it kind of really ties in, doesn't it, with the kind of conservative values she's been talking about Thatcherism, the kind of dream of home ownership, and also as a measure that the Tories say would boost the economy. It's certainly something that the Institute for Fiscal Studies has been arguing, that this would be the kind of single biggest tax cut that would most help boost the economy, describing it as a kind of drag on growth, because it kind of traps people in their existing homes, stops people moving around for whatever reason.
Yes, the interesting thing is it doesn't just help potentially first-time buyers get on, but actually if you're an elderly person who wants to downsize, often one of the biggest obstacles is having to pay that stamp duty.
Absolutely, and people wanting to move around for work and so on. And, you know, it is a big tax. It's paid on all properties over £125,000. The thresholds were set years ago, and the Tories are sort of arguing, well, they haven't been changed, so more and more people are being dragged into higher bands. But this is something that they're saying would apply to all all purchases of primary residences. So people would still have to pay it for second homes, and also the situation is different, I think, in Scotland and Wales. So this is something that's applying to England. But it is a big cost. So at the moment, they say it would cost 4.5 billion. But earlier I was talking about 18 billion. That's the total amount that stamp duty brings into the Treasury. But doing it in this way would cost them 4.5 billion. But they've set aside 9 billion of the kind of savings that they say they're planning to make, because they say, well, by the time of the next election, that's how much it's more likely to cost then. That's still a big chunk of the savings that they say they found, that they say they found 23 billion in welfare cuts, for example. So that's a big chunk of that. Opposition parties, the Greens, have come out, well, this is so unfair. They're helping billionaires, they're helping the richest in society, rather than putting money back into the welfare state and helping the poorest. And that will be a clear attack line. They obviously like to see some kind of dividing line set.
And it's whether, frankly, at the moment, the country can afford it. But we also, Amanda, heard, unsurprisingly, the leader of the opposition attacking the Labour government. And there were a lot of attacks on Labour government. Let's get a sense of what Kemi Badenoch had to say about the current incumbents of Downing Street.
All they have delivered is a doom loop of higher taxes, weaker borders, and month after month of chaos. They had a plan to win, but no plan for power, no vision for Britain. They know how to make promises, but not how to deliver them. But what have Labour given us? An anti-corruption minister under investigation for corruption, a homelessness minister who made her own tenants homeless, a housing secretary sacked for dodging housing taxes. You couldn't make this stuff up. We had a transport secretary fired for stealing a phone, and our ambassador in Washington thrown out in disgrace. There is an old joke that a diplomat is someone sent abroad to lie for their country. Well, at least in Peter Mandelson, they had a man of experience.
It was actually at times quite a funny speech, it must be said, and I think you did get the sense that she was genuinely quite enjoying it. But what was interesting is there were lots of attacks on the Labour Party. That's not surprising. Very little on reform, in contrast to what we've seen at other party conferences over the last couple of weeks.
Well, absolutely. Sir Ed Davey, Keir Starmer, I mean, all talking about reform as effectively an existential threat to the soul of our country. I think both of them used that word. Not the case with Kemi Badenoch. Clearly, she knows there's quite a crossover between Tory voters and those who are moving across to reform. She doesn't want to alienate a lot of her core supporters who are listening to what Nigel Farage has to say. Now, other ministers throughout this conference have been kind of hitting out reform for what they've described as kind of socialist policies, saying they want to cut taxes but also whack up spending, offering to lift the two-child benefit cap, that kind of thing. That's not something we heard from her. She made a couple of kind of gentle jokes, saying, oh, along with all the party leaders, they want to shake the magic money tree. That's come back again.
Indeed, yes.
In terms of welfare spending. But yeah, as you say, it was all about Labour. And, she was relishing that kind of roll call of the kind of scandals that we've seen hitting Labour in recent months. And, I mean, it's a gift to her, isn't it? I mean, all of those situations, Peter Mandelson, Angela Rayner, Tulip.
I mean, she's not had to work hard to find examples of it.
Exactly, and I think that really just highlights the difficulty Labour are finding themselves in, because not only could she make that kind of serious economic attack on the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, which of course is something we hear them making all the time, but kind of tying it in with a kind of broader attack on the kind of morality of the current Labour government. I mean, it's not really something we would have expected to be sitting here talking about a year, more than a year on from their election, but that's what it is. And I think that is really throwing the gauntlet down back to Labour in a way that we haven't sort of really heard from her before, because, I mean, she hasn't given a conference speech before. This is her first, and, obviously she's trying to make sure it's not her last one. But I think she'll have done enough to silence the immediate critics, I think.
Amanda, thank you very much indeed for all your analysis this afternoon. Amanda Acaster, our political correspondent. And that is it, indeed, for our coverage from the Conservative Party conference here live in Manchester, with the Conservative leader making her first conference speech, making that quite significant announcement that the Conservatives would scrap stamp duty if they were returned to government. We'll have continuing analysis on the Politics Hub tonight at 7 p.m. with me talking to Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor. Up next, it is the rest of the day's news, including more with Matt Bobette on Kemi Badenoch's maiden speech at the Conservative Party conference as leader. Stay tuned.